In this video, we are going to start talking about our pond grading. Now, I'm not sure how long it's actually going to take, so this could possibly be split up into 1 or 2 videos. If not, maybe 3, depending on how long it takes to design our simple pond. Now, when designing our pond, in industry, we would have to go to the government of Canada to acquire some rainfall data. And being that this is just southwest of Calgary, that should be pretty easy to track down. But for this project, we're just going to concentrate on a pure volume. So we're going to try and design a pond that holds, we'll say 10,000 cubic meters of water. Now, running a quick area on this, the area of land that's draining into my pond is going to be about 1.5 million square meters. So quite a bit of land will be draining through this little culvert and into this pond. Now, at this point in your design, you should already have your corridor. You should have your culverts generally laid out with your elevations. Your culverts labeled, so there's an elevation on each end of my culvert. My water level in my pond needs to be below this. So part of our pond may be designed under the existing ground. So we're going to have to cut some earth out to make room for the pond. So first of all, we're going to generally lay out an area of a pond. So I'm going to use actually a quick rectangle so it can make square. And I'm going to make it dimensions of, we're just going to go 100 by 100 for now. Now, doing this 100 by 100, just some simple math. We can open up a calculator. 100 times 100, 10,000 square meters. So if we design the pond to be 1 meter deep, this is going to hold 10,000 cubic meters. Now, we can make it smaller if we make it deeper. So if we go 2 meters deep, we could probably make it 50,000 square meters. So 100 by 10. So it all depends on the land. It depends where you're designing it. It depends on groundwater underneath and everything. So depending where the pond is, where the site is, that's what's going to constrain you. But for this exercise, we're just going to make a pond that's 100 by 100. And we're going to make it around 1 meter deep. We may have to go slightly more than 1 meter deep. So I'm going to just rotate my polyline a little bit. And I'm going to place it generally close to my culvert. Now this polyline, as I stated in my previous sites video, we need to start from the bottom up. So this polyline is going to be my pond floor. So the very, very bottom of the pond. Now we're going to make a few sites ahead of time, so we don't have to do it as we make them. So we're going to make a site called pond bottom. And I'll expand that so we can see. We're going to make another site called pond berm. And we're going to make a third site called pond sump. So the pond we'll be designing, yes, it'll be a square pond, but it's going to have a sloping bottom, and it's going to have a sump that all the water drains to. Now, in the city of Calgary, they like you to have 4 bays. In essence, is pretty much the same. Make another site for your 4 bay, and you can design a 4 bay into it. If we have time, maybe we can get to that. But right now I've drawn a 100 by 100 polyline. I'm going to turn that into a feature line, and I'm going to make them all different colors so we can tell the difference. So I'm going to go create feature lines from objects. So under grading, create feature lines from objects. I'm going to place this on my pond bottom site. We're going to make it red for now. The layer is automatic, so it's going to C-feet-line-pond bottom. I want to erase existing entities, so this will clean up all the line work underneath of it. So it's taking a polyline, it's turning it into a feature line, it's going to delete that polyline. I also want to assign elevations. So in the Assign Elevations tab, generally for now, I want to take some elevations from my existing ground surface. This Insert Intermediate Grade Breakpoints, if you select this, every time your feature line crosses a triangle in your surface, it's going to add another point into it, and it's going to become very pixelated, and there's going to be a lot of nodes in it, and it's just going to cause you issues when grading. So as this is a fairly simple pond bottom, I'm just going to from surface existing ground, and what it's done, it's taken an elevation of existing ground on every single side of my pond. So if I select this now, we look up here, it's now a feature line. I can right click and look at my elevation editor. So in the elevation editor, this shows you, if you click on each of the headings, which node it is. And you can see down on the screen, as you choose a different node, it moves the little glyph around. Now that glyph is just a visual thing. Sometimes Civil 3D leaves it over in your drawing. You don't have to worry about it. It's just to help you visualize which one you're modifying. Now for a pond bottom, it looks like this 1115 is my lowest point. 1117. Now the contours are pretty light in here. I've got them on a 25 meter interval, so they're not overwhelming. But I'm going to make my pond flow to this far right corner. Or we're going to make this whole backside the low side. So if I take this, we'll go 11, we'll just make it 1116 for now. I'm going to make this corner 1116. And now to drive the elevation up here, I'm going to change this. So I've made that 2%, brings the top corner up to 1118. And then change this one to 0. So right now, my surface is going from 1118 down to 1116. Now that is kind of hard to visualize. So we're going to make a new surface, and I'm going to name it the same as my site, Pond Bottom. And I'm going to leave it on the 5 and 1 meter interval contours, and I'm going to click OK. So this feature line is going to be the only addition in this surface. And when we make edits, it will update the surface. We can set it to rebuild automatic, and you can see what's happening as it's going on. So I'm going to select my feature line, right click, add to surface as a break line. I'm going to choose my pond bottom. I'm going to click OK. You can fill out the description if you want. I generally leave them blank. This mid-ordinate distance, what this controls is when you have a circular feature line, which we don't have any, so we'll just leave it. A good general rule of thumb, leave it for 0.001. So I'm going to click OK. And I've now got a surface building in here, but we want it to rebuild as I edit it. So right click on your pond bottom in your tool space, and we're going to select Rebuild Automatic. So now when I make any change to that feature line, it's going to update my surface. Now, I want my floor, the floor of my pond, to be V-shaped. So we have to add in a few nodes. Now there's a couple ways of doing this. We can add in extra points using this insert elevation point here. Now this inserts an elevation point that you can only modify up and down. So if you had to change the shape of your pond, or if you have to move it, this one will not suffice. If you went up to grading, and under Edit Feature Line Geometry, we can insert a PI. So I'm going to use Insert PI. I'm going to select my feature line, and as we go around, you can see that what it wants to do. So if I'm out here, it's going to add a PI out there. It's going to draw my feature line from there to there, which I don't want. For now, I just want to go to the midpoint. So I'm adding an elevation point to the midpoint there. It asks me to specify the elevation. I'm going to hit enter. We can now see that there's an additional point in here. So it's added the point at 250. The second elevation point I'm going to add in, and if you saw that little trick before, if you hold shift and right click, that will bring up your snap menu. Now, as you know in Civil 3D, when we have snaps turned on near a surface, it tends to cause issues as it's trying to snap to many, many different lines. So shift right click, and I'm going to select midpoint again. And I'm going to add another midpoint right here. Specify my elevation. We're just going to hit enter. So it'll take the default elevation that's on the feature line, And now as you see, when I go around, it's added those points in. I'm not going to add any on the left or right, as we just want a V flowing this way. So when I'm done the command, I'm going to hit enter, and hit enter again to actually exit the command. And now as you see, when we go around our feature line, there's 0, there's 50, there's 100. So sloping from here to here, I want it to be 2% down. And as we can see that our surface is updated. This one is automatically staying in elevation of 1118, so this is 2% back up. We're going 2% down. We want another -2 to the bottom and back up. So if I go into my surface style now, turn on exaggerate elevations, we'll do 5 under triangles and contours. And we'll save this. So when you're grading, save often. We haven't actually got to the grading aspects of it yet, but it's just general rule of thumb. So I'll select my surface, object viewer to show you guys what's going on. So if I object viewer it, we now have, if I view it from the dead right, all our water's flowing down to this lowest point. So we're draining into the center and draining down. So this is going to collect the water all in one point down here. And that's eventually where we're going to design our sump, right here. So we can throw some slope arrows on there if we want, but we'll do that on the regular pond. So there's our cell floor, or our pond floor. Now we're going to start working on our pond berm. So as you know, we've already made the sites. Let's create a surface called pond berm. So that's just in there now. We can right click rebuild automatic. I'm going to close this feature line dialog box. So now we need to make our pond berm. When we're grading, and I'm just drawing another polyline. So I'm snapping to all 4 corners, and I'm going to offset it. We'll go 1 meter. So I'm offsetting it 1 meter to the inside. I'm going to delete my old one. So right now this feature line, or this polyline, is 1 meter inside the outside of our floor. Now when we're grading, the feature line you're grading from has to be inside the surface that you're targeting. And that will all make sense in a minute here when we get to it. So I'm going to create feature lines from objects. Now this is going on pond berm, so this is the second part of our pond. We're going to make this one blue, EDT feature line blue. Notice the layers going on. We're going to erase existing entities, and we're going to assign elevations just generally for now. And we want it from, let's go from existing ground again. So we're going to check out the elevation editor. And I'm going to choose these elevations now. I'm going to find the highest one, the lowest one, 1115.892. Let's round that up to 1116. And let's take that one step further to 1117. But part of our floor is at 1118. So for now, let's just go to 1120. So we want to make sure this is above existing ground. Now, if it's above your floor, if it's below, you'll know as soon as you start grading. It will show you pretty quickly, and we'll go through that too. So this entire top of my berm is going to be flat. Water's flat. It doesn't conform to any slopes other than flow down hills. So we need the top of the berm to be flat, even though the bottom of the pond is sloped. So I've got my feature line in there now. It's selected as a feature line. It's at elevation 1120. So we're going to go up to grading, and we're going to create grading. So in our default template, we have a few different grading criteria. There's projection at distance, there's projection to elevation, and there's projection to surface. So we can tell this feature line we want to project it to a distance at a specific slope. So we want to go 5 meters at 3% down. We can tell it we want to project it to an elevation. So we can say we want to go to elevation 1115 at a 3-to-1 slope. Or we can go projection to the surface. So with this one, we'll select our surface and we'll specify the slope that we want it to project at. So we'll select EDDT projection to surface and we'll click OK. So after we select the projection to surface, we can now select the one we want to use in here. Now, conforming to the City of Calgary design guidelines for their ponds, let's quickly go look that up. So in our design specs, it says a maximum interior side slopes in active storage zone are 5-to-1 to 7-to-1. So we're just going to treat the entire pond as 5-to-1. So we actually do have a 5-to-1 in here, so we want to slope 5-to-1 to surface. Now let's review this grading creation dialog box in a little bit of detail. The first button here is to set our grading group. So we have our site, we now have to define a grading group within the site. So let's define our grading group. Our site is the pond berm, and I like to name my grading groups the exact same as my sites. It helps keep things consistent. We don't want to automatically create surfaces, and we're going to click OK. So we've now set up our group. The second button here is to set your target surface. So since we're targeting a surface, we need to set this up, and we want to target our pond bottom. So select pond bottom and click OK. The third one over is if we want to change the grading layer, but it's all default, so leave that alone. This button here is how you select your criteria, which we've already gone through. This button here, we can edit our styles, but we're going to leave them as is. This button here allows you to create the grading, create transitions and infills. We'll deal with that one in a second. Right. The next button over, we can edit, delete, or change grading groups. And there's some grading volume tools and surfaces. And just a few little boxes, which would be the elevation editor, or grading editor, elevation editor, grading group properties, and grading properties. This little I'm hiding arrow, just hiding a few options within your actual grading. So, and this is a bug in Civil 3D. It removes your grading options, so we can just close and go back, grading, create grading. It's kept most of our settings except the 5-to-1. So set that 5-to-1 back up if that's disappeared. It's been a bug in Civil 3D for a few years. This just disappears and you don't know quite what you're doing. And now that we've selected 5-to-1 to surface, we're going to select this little drop down and we're going to create grading. So always read your command line. So right now, it wants me to select the feature. So I want to grade my pond berm, and I want to grade it to the inside. So we're going to create the inside berm. Do I want to apply it to the entire length? Yes. My cut slope of 5 and my fill slope of 5-to-1. So it's basically making side slopes of 20%. Now, because we have the sloped V on the floor, that's why it's not square and it has some odd shape to it. So again, save it after you've created something. The waiting while it saves is definitely worth it. And then we can object viewer this piece of grading quickly. So what it's done, it's created some interior side slopes for your pond. So I'm going to select this line that's added at the very end. Do not select the interior ones. And I'm going to select this other one. I'm going to right click, I'm going to add it to my surface as a break line, and I'm going to add it to pond berm. So right now, it overlaps with the pond floor because it's targeting the pond floor. So if we view this now, we see we are starting to get somewhat of a pond here. But as we start adding more bits in, we'll have to fix some edges and some triangles and clean it up. So the next step, we have to define our top of berm. So this is going to be 2 meters wide. It's going to be at a slope of 0. So our criteria set is projection at distance. We're going to go OK. And the only grading style that will let us choose a slope of 0 is ones with a percentage. So we're just going to go 1% of distance. Yes, it says 1%, but that's easily changeable. So I'm going to select this feature line again. I'm going to grade to the outside now. Yes, I want to apply it to the entire length, a distance of 2 meters, and a grade of 0. So now that this next piece of grading is in here, we've noticed that it's rounded the corners. Now they don't actually build a pond with rounded corners. They'll square this off. And there is no easy way to get Civil 3D to do that for us. So we're going to have to delete this piece of grading and accomplish the outside corners a different way. So let's use the delete grading command. Select a point within the grading and it highlights which ones. So I want to delete that one and I'm just going to hit enter. So under the grading options, and just let me take a look for it here. Under edit feature line geometry, we want a stepped offset. So I want to offset this 2 meters. I'm going to select my blue feature line. Click on the outside, elevation difference of 0. So we now have our feature line on the outside. We can add it to our pond berm surface as a break line. We'll click OK. Now nothing's actually showed up since it's completely flat, but if we object viewer it, we now see that there's a berm, 2 meter wide, flat, 0 slope berm on the outside there. And this looks so ridiculously tall because we have it 10 times exaggerated. So these may have to be edited afterwards depending on the amount of water your pond holds. And actually, let's take a quick look at that now. So how much water does this pond hold? Now for this next command, we need our exaggeration turned off since it uses the exaggerated contours. So under edit surface style, my 3D geometry, I'm just going to go to use surface elevations. My triangle display mode, use surface elevation. So all that's done is made it so the pond looks a little more realistic. So I'm going to type in the command stage storage. So bring up the stage storage box. Now, we don't need to fill in any report titles, project names, descriptions. I just want to know how much water this holds. And this tool relies on the contours. So every time you have a contour, it will report to you a new volume. So if you want a more accurate reading, increase the contour interval. If you need a less accurate, decrease it. So I'm going to define my basin and leave everything by default. Define basin from surface contours and click define again, and I'm going to select the contours that I know for sure are my berm. So I'm going to click OK, and we notice down here now it's giving us a bunch of information. So we can go through the whole list. As I said before, my contour intervals are 0.1 meter, so it's reporting a volume every 0.1 meter. It's reporting a surface area, 2D surface area, at every contour. So from the lowest to the highest. So our top contour is 9,604 square meters. If you remember back to when we did the floor, that was 10,000 square meters. Our top contour is probably right underneath of there. We can make this a little bit bigger. And we have some incremental volumes here. So this pond, the cumulative volume from the bottom to the very, very, very top is 23,567 cubic meters. So we'll remember that number, and I'll just cancel this for a second. We can rerun it. This pipe's flowing in at an elevation of 1116.075. So what's the volume at 1116? So if I go back and run the command again, stage storage, to find my basin, we'll find 1116 in the list. That's only holding 147.792 square meters. So that is, or cubic meters, that is definitely not enough. Now let's add one more piece of grading to this, and then we'll go about modifying how deep the pond is. Now, knowing where it sits in relation to the ground is good, so that's why we're doing this step next. So I'm going to project back to the surface, projection to surface, but I'm going to be changing my surface to my existing ground. We want to grade 3:1 to the surface, or what do the standards stay? Actually, let's go 5:1 again. And we're going to create grading. So I want to grade from my outside top of berm, so this is inside top of berm, outside top of berm, towards existing ground, applying it to entire length, yes. 5:1, 5:1. So I'm going to hit enter and hit escape now. And it's created my outside top of berm. So I'm going to add this to my surface quickly. Pond berm. And now if we object viewer this, we can see where it sits. So right now the majority of my pond, or our pond, we need to build it up. So we need to kind of balance it 50-50 if we can. So first of all, we're going to have to lower the floor. So let's start by lowering it 2 meters right now. So if you select your floor feature line, and again, different colors will help keep you less confused. I'm going to select my red feature line, that's my floor. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to raise lower it. So let's actually go 1.5 meters. So I want to go minus 1.5. So I'm taking that and dropping it straight down 1.5 meters. Now as you see, my pond grading has changed. So I'm going to rebuild my pond berm surface. Now when you update grading, sometimes it doesn't rebuild your surface even though rebuild automatic is set, but I'm going to rebuild it manually. So as you see, our floor is now quite a bit smaller, but in turn with that, I'm going to lower my berm ones as well. So we're going to select the two, and actually before I do this, I'm going to save. So when you start modifying grading again, save often. And give that just a minute here to save. I'm going to select my two feature lines. I'm going to right click, raise lower, and let's go minus 1.5. So now this part of the pond is in cut. So we got to cut this side out. And let's 3D, or let's object viewer this so we can visualize it. This side we still need to build up, but a little corner here we're cutting into the ground. So we'll close that, and let's go check the stage storage again of 1116. Define my basin, define it based on those contours. Now at 1116, we're holding 3934 cubic meters. So again, that's still not enough. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to lower my floor another meter. And then I'm going to lower my berm that same meter. Make sure everything's rebuilt properly. Now, if we hover over our surface, our pond berm is now at 1117.458. So that's about 1.5 meters higher than our inlet. So we can run the stage storage command again. We're going to define a basin. And 1116. We're at 9612 cubic meters. So we're almost there. Now we can lower the floor another, raise lower. If we do it minus 0.3, that's probably going to be sufficient. Rebuild pond berm and run the stage storage one more time just to confirm. From contours. $11.16. So now we're at 10,760 cubic meters. So that's more than enough for our exercise. We only want to make it hold 10,000. So the sump is going to be in part 3 of the video, but in the last part of this video, I'm going to show you how to create a surface for your pond water level. So instead of going to the stage storage every time, we can run surface volumes on it instead, which is much quicker, and we can get that information a lot faster. So pond water level, we're going to go OK. Now I'm going to create another stepped offset. Stepped offset using the command. I'm only going to do it 0.5 meter this time. I'm going to go to the inside, elevation difference of 0. So we're going to have to make another site, pond water level. Now to put this feature line on that site, select it, right click, move to site. We're going to go to our pond water level and click OK. Now this one's still red, but let's turn it a different color. So right click, select it, right click, edit or feature line properties. Let's make this one yellow. And our blue ones are still here, they're just hidden. So let's bring them back. So we now have our floor, we have our water level, we have our berms. So I'm going to elevation editor on my water level, and we know that 1116 is what it is, or 1116, and make sure to get them all. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to add it to my pond water level surface and select OK. We're just going to rebuild automatic. Now you can't actually see anything because it is a flat surface. There's not much going on. But where the real power comes in, and they've removed that from 2017 from the menu bar, but if we type report surface volume, it brings up our surface volume panorama, which is really handy. You can refresh it on refresh it on the go. You can pan around in CAD and do changes while it's open. So let me do that again. So I'm going to create a new volume entry. My base surface is going to be my pond berm. Now, base surface is what now it's hard to visualize when comparing a pond surface, but if we're doing existing ground, your base surface would be your existing ground, your comparison surface would be your design. So we're going to treat the pond berm as our existing ground and the water level as our design. So pond berm would be your base surface, pond water level would be your comparison, and that's where our numbers, we get cut and fill here. So to go from the berm to the water level, we can completely ignore the cut number, and all we're concentrating on is the fill number. Now, as you see, this fill number is a little bit different than our stage storage. When we're running stage storage, we shouldn't have any outside berms. So that could have been taking into account that the outside volumes. So to show you how easy this is to modify, we're going to raise, or to get new volumes, we're going to raise our surface up since we have a little bit too much in here. So we're going to select our red line. We're going to raise lower. I'm going to come up 0.3 again. I'm going to rebuild my pond berm. And then I'm going to refresh this. So recompute volumes, which brings our fill down to 1125.8. So we can go a little bit more. So we can select our red line. Not elevation editor, sorry. Right click. Make sure you select the right line as well. Again, colors. Right click, raise lower. Gonna raise it up another 0.3. Rebuild my pond berm. Recompute my volumes. Now I'm at 99.84. So again, you don't need to get it exactly 10,000. And we're relying on LiDAR data here. We're relying on something that could be up to a meter off. So for this exercise right now, this would be acceptable. And as soon as we add our sump into it, we're going to have the proper amount of fill in there. So that was kind of our site 1 and site 2, our pond floor and our pond berm for our pond. And again, keep things separate. Make them different colors. Make sure you use styles to your advantage here. Because right now we've got quite a bit going on over top of each other. We've got at least 2 surfaces here. We select them. We can go to properties. We've got 2 surfaces. If we select everything, we have 2 surfaces, 6 feature lines, and 2 pieces of grading right now. So as we build more and add more onto this pond with other sites, and maybe in the next video we'll do the sump and a forebay on this so we can conform to the way the city of Calgary likes it. We're going to start stacking things on top of each other. So again, proper sites, proper styles, make sure you use proper colors, offset things properly. And again, we're done with this surface now, so we can freeze it out of here. We'll just use a LEYFRZ command. And we'll just freeze this one surface out of here. We don't need it anymore. And that gives us a little bit less to look at. So that was part 1 of creating just an intermediate pond video here. Again, designing the floor, just a slope V floor, and a pond berm with the inside and outside berms, and the inside berms targeting your pond floor. Part 2 of the video will concentrate again on the sump and the forebay.